What's up, everyone? Online prep coach, Alex Cook here at pepcoach.com. Love this video idea coming to us from our content request thread. Caring for our aging parents, or if you're a caregiver and you're working with the elderly. It's such a good idea. Love the topic. Love caring for our children, our parents, and everything like that. So context, right? We're going to leave injectable preparations and things like that out because most people in that generation, it just seems like a lot of them are risk adverse, or rather completely adverse to anyone who's not a doctor, having any kind of injection. So let's just say it's that type of generation and they're not gonna go that route. Let's look at some of the easy things you can implement right now. Also, if you are the caregiver at the facility, maybe you can actually talk to the individual's children if maybe they are at the later stages of life, other problems, things like that, to maybe say, hey, here's a fact sheet, like this would help with this would help with that. I think that'd be really cool. So a lot of different ways we can go about this. First, fix the mitochondria, because everyone's mitochondria in those elderly populations is pretty much downregulated, which causes a lot of problems. So the effects of aging at the mitochondrial level starts to happen. So let's do that action. I have a cool idea. So we see downregulation in mitochondria as we age. We see a downregulation in stem cell production, downregulation in superoxide dismutase, downregulation in glutathione levels, downregulation in a couple. So we're going to say flexibility, meaning neurological flexibility, metabolic flexibility, and mitochondrial flexibility. And then we see the downregulation in the overall somatropic axis and a downregulation in the androgenic sex hormone axis, and then almost always we're going to see downregulations in neural processing. So, top 8 problems, right? Whether it's your parent or your patient, almost everyone who's going to be over 60 is going to have these problems. And all these problems start to happen anywhere from, these days, not going to be as low as 20, but we're seeing this happen in most people between 30 to 50 years old. So if we kind of look at that and go, okay, what can we do from here? And again, we're going to stick with 8 because in this population, we don't want to give them 20 pills at one time. They're more than likely already taking Lipitor and all these other compounds from their doctors. So we're going to respect that and layer one thing at a time. Mitochondria. Urolithin A is one of the easiest things to bring in here and one of the highest yield players for this population. We are ideally looking at 500 milligrams AM and PM, and that is urolithin A. I finally, due to popular demand, did get a discount code with MitoPure, so there you go. I think it's code Kickle. I think it's code Kickle for everything. Stem cell production, this is where we're looking at stem regen, which of all the compounds out there, all the products out there, is one of the more favorable ones. We're specifically looking at the release form, and generally, we're looking at something like 2 caps before bed. I have tried, because I love stem regen, I love the research behind it, I love what I've seen in application. Price tag's high, right? So there's a lot of other, like Stem Works, there's a lot of other stem cell products out there. I haven't seen any of them live up to the hype of stem regen, and it's not as strong as GHKCU in terms of stem cell migration, right? Because it's actually causing the donation, it's causing the release of stem cells from our own endogenous system, which is different than the migration aspects of GHKCU. So if we can't go with injectable GHKCU, then we're going to be looking more at using something like stem regen, maybe with some rebounding work. So even though they're in their later stages of life, we want to keep them healthy, vibrant, and moving. So if we could literally do some rebounding work, get some bone-based trauma, some stress on the bones, that's going to, be careful obviously, that's going to cause overall red bone marrow to cause a trauma, release more stem cells. So that will complement the stem regen. I've literally tried every different kind of stem cell supplement product out there, besides exogenous stem cells and exogenous exosomes and things like that, which for the price point of stem regen, I think you actually could do exogenous exosome or cell factor therapy once a quarter or something like that. And that is an option. So that could be either this conversation or going with those. So I'm going to say, or exosomes quarterly, and then I'll do cell factors. Depending on, again, in this population, how open-minded they are. If they are very open-minded, then I would prefer to do quarter 1 exosomes, quarter 2 cell factors, and keep cycling back and forth. See which one they anecdotally respond better to, and then do that one every quarter, or based on finances. That would be preferred over stem regen because of its higher chemical signaling capacity. But if someone can't afford it, or they don't believe in it, or something like that, then that's at least an easy over-the-counter supplement to really bring in and kind of bridge the gap there. Superoxide dismutase, we're looking more at mitochondrial DNA, mitochondrial interactions, the immune system as a whole. Superoxide dismutase levels go down like crazy. So we can push those up with spirulina. We're gonna lump this in with, because I love energy bits, right? We're gonna lump this in with the chlorophyll donation from the actual chlorella. So spirulina is gonna drive the superoxide dismutase, but we're also gonna say chlorophyll is also gonna be a big player here, because that's also another thing that we're gonna need at this level. So we're looking at energy bits to bridge that gap. We're doing the spirulina, 5 to 10 tabs AM, and then the chlorella, 5 to 10 tabs PM. I do believe that they recommend going with a much higher dose, but unless if you have, you know what, no. Very rarely do I take people above 10 tablets of both per day. I know it's recommended, but if you look at the actual amount of superoxide dismutase donation and chlorocoaction you get, remember, these are algae, but we can still only have so much of a chemical signaling threshold because they're over-the-counter supplements, so it's capped. It's capped at physiological limits. And even in my most dysfunctional cases, because I'm thinking back, I very rarely have people go above 10 tablets of both because we're just not getting that much extra bang for a buck. You can eat them like candy, it's not gonna hurt you, it's only gonna be beneficial for you. But if we're looking at taking 20 tablets versus 10, I think the difference is maybe 5%, versus taking 5 tablets compared to 10, the difference is like 50%. So 10 tablets seems to be roughly where we're capped at for superoxide dismutase and for the chlorophyll donation, but take that as you see fit. Glutathione, this one's a little bit tougher. Ideally, we're looking more so at just bringing in traditional IVs. Once a week, or an intramuscular subcutaneous injection once or twice per week, depending on what they can do. Let's say they don't want to do that though, then we bring in NAC, right? N-acetylcysteine, that is going to actually liberate cysteine from albumin in the blood and donate it to the entire synthetic process of glutathione. So usually anywhere from about 600 milligrams to 1.2 grams, and we're taking that generally in the AM. But again, that is if they are adverse to doing something like the IV or the sub-Q or intramuscular. Now the flexibility is an interesting one. So we talked about the mitochondrial flexibility, which we're kind of attacking up there, so we'll kind of leave that there. That's also the conversation you'd have with changing their water to structured water, to first being, reverse osmosis, then structured, then maybe altering the actual charge of it or structuring it in other ways. Tons of different things you could do to deuterium deplete it, but this is where we would also alter the water system. And because we're talking about that, I won't put it on the board, but this is where you could also sneak a quantum block into their house, just to alter the spin of their environment. Anytime I've done that in the past, I've told people don't tell them, like literally hide it somewhere that they never check, and your parents' house and that one cupboard that no one ever goes into, and just monitor and ask them things, like, hey, does that room feel different to you today? Like after a week, or you've been feeling different lately? And about 9 times out of 10, they go, oh, I've been feeling great for no reason. It's been so cool. And then explain to them the quantum block. That demographic isn't quite on the whole conscious conversation journey, quantum reality and things like that. So it's usually easier to show them and then explain it. So sneak it in, maybe. Then we have the neurological side of things. From the neurological flexibility standpoint, that's where, again, as processing is going down, we need to fuel that neurological capacity. So the fueling comes in from our traditional sources. We are mainly in this community looking at bringing in acetyl L-carnitine, because that's going to donate methyl groups to the entire acetylcholine synthetic process, which is a big plus. We want that. Could be the exogenous ketones, could be oxygen therapies, could be extra glucose in the diet, tons of things there. Then the metabolic side of things, this one's tough. This is where we can usually bring in a higher tier peptide like an SLU PP332 to not just drive metabolic flexibility, but mitochondrial and neurological flexibility and potentiate the mitochondrial work up here. We bring in SLU because it's orally bioavailable. Whereas if we were to go ahead and use MOTC or SS31, you could go with the SS31 nasal sprays, but we're looking at the metabolic world, some more global aspects of, excuse me, that's the coffee. Looking more at metabolic aspects of glucose metabolism, lipid metabolism, nitrogen metabolism, things like that. That's going to be more of a very low dose of SLU PP332, generally like 100 milligrams or micrograms. Micrograms, 100 micrograms of SLU. We don't want to make that mistake, right? The somatropic side of things, that goes down, right? Most in this world are not willing to go the growth hormone peptide route, right? If they are, which would be absolutely awesome, then we would prefer to go with ipamorelin and something like a CGC 1295. But as they age, as people age, their enzymatic capacity to cleave these compounds goes down. So then they'd actually prefer and get better results off an exogenous growth hormone. But I say we would prefer the peptides because most individuals will not take exogenous growth hormone due to the stigma that was given to them as they were raised. So in this world, you kind of, again, got to pick your battles. You could go with a low dose MK677, but I almost never use that in these elderly populations because they almost always get edema, blood sugar dysfunction, more hunger, like usually almost always causes problems. So if you could, sometimes you can't attack this cascade, but if you could, we would bring in the traditional IPM, CJC, 1295, without that, daily or even a couple days before bed, depending on what they're willing to do. And remember that with frequency. Frequency for here is if you can get them to do a glutathione IV or injection only once a week, once every 2 weeks, that's still gonna be better than daily application of NAC. But that also means you can do both. So you're dealing with the actual frequency aspect of what they're willing to do. And this also, again, depends on if it's your parent, if they're open-minded, or if you're the actual practitioner provider and it's a patient. So the androgenic side of things, this is almost where HRT has to come in. And this is the tough conversation. You could go the route of talking about the Tungat Alis, Sustantias, Shilajits, things like that. Shilajit's more of the mitochondrial player. Sustantia is more going to be driving a lot of the HPA axis and things like that. Tungat Ali is going to be more like the LH, luteinizing hormone side of things. And then for females, same kind of players over there, but then you also have like Siberian rhubarb for the estradiol, maybe like a chasteberry for the progesterone, but almost always in this community, they respond better to straight HRT. We've talked about and had conversations on HRT in the past, so we already know the basics of that, but that's something to at least bring up to see if it's something they would be willing to look into, because as they're aging, usually testosterone levels are already tanked. Females tanked estradiol, tanked progesterones, and then that causes a lot of these other problems and cascades to go down because they can't even keep the lights on from a healing-based cellular aspect because hormones are down. So big one to look out for there. Then we'll say the last one's gonna be neuroprocessing. This is where the nootropics and the games come in, right? So we have to be getting in our neurological reps for the day. Have them play the Elevate app, have them write in cursive, have them use their non-dominant hand, have them do these little things to reading, right? Getting out and socializing, use your brain. That is the biggest thing that will actually blunt Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's. All of those will not happen if someone actively uses their brain because you're clearing inflammatory plaques and proteins. And take that with a grain of salt. If you have a terrible lifestyle, if you have that accumulation of tau proteins, plaques, and things like that, and you're not changing those, but you're using your brain still, that's not gonna be enough. But if you're doing that on top of bringing in nootropics, which by definition are brain-based antioxidants, then you can go ahead and improve neuroprocessing, clear out these inflammatory plaques and proteins, there we go, and pretty good to go. So saffron, we want a higher crocin than safranol content. Nootropics Depot is going to be our go-to. We would be bringing in something like 30 milligrams, which is one capsule of saffron before bed. That's not just going to clear out a lot of inflammatory plaques and proteins in the brain. It's also going to form somewhat of a barrier on ocular tissue and almost work to block blue light. It improves improves nighttime driving rather. But it's pretty cool. So I think the only supplement out there that can actually drive that kind of, I don't want to say a bio-shield because that sounds lame, but almost like a shield protective effect on the eyes against blue light overexposure, which is really cool, right? Then we need something, we need our baseline driver of tiger milk. I don't think there's a person out there that would not benefit from tiger milk, because it's just driving up raw nerve growth factor. Rather, it's the mimetic, right? So it's mimicking nerve growth factor to help and force your brain to grow. So that's 300 milligrams of tiger milk. That's going to be one of the baseline drivers. There's a lot of other ones to bring in here. I'll end on these two, right? Because we have to have them in because hormones are tanked. DHEA and micronized pregnenolone. I find most people respond a lot better to 100 milligrams of DHEA. I know there's 25 milligram doses, 50 milligrams, and everyone does respond differently. But in this community, and kind of actually in general, I almost always start people with about 100 milligrams of DHEA unless there's a history of too much downstream estradiol and problems like that. Most people, though, about 100 milligrams of DHEA. And then micronized pregnenolone, 5 or 10 milligrams. We want the little tablets from the Neuroprocessing Depot because that is going to dissolve into that buccal layer, and we're going to get more neuroplastic-based changes and effects. Versus, and that's more sigma-1 receptor drivers, whereas if we were to higher dose it, that's going to spill over more to the sex hormone cascades. And if we have this all set up properly, they're already going to be on their HRT. So that shouldn't be something that they would need. We need more of the neurochemical processing from that. This is a very basic top 8-ish guide for fixing your parents, making sure they're aging gracefully, and or if you're working in that kind of facility, you can care for your patients better. Type this up or have AI do its work on here. I don't know how to do that, but do that. You can hand this out to them. I do not care if it's benefiting them. Awesome. Honorable mentions here, you have to have vitamin D, vitamin K, your magnesium. We have to have some fatty 15, the plasmalogens, like the list goes on and on. So it depends on where you want to start. But honestly, anything I just mentioned or anything on here is going to start pushing them in the right direction. So it's going to be based more on finances and then honestly how many pills they want to take. So take that with a grain of salt. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out thepepcoach.com. See you next time.